An impenetrable defense. Separatist ships blockade the resource-rich planet of Christophsis, trapping Senator Bail Organa and his relief effort. Desperate to aid the esteemed senator, a Republic task force, under the command of Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, must break the impasse. But time runs short for the senator and the good citizens of Christophsis.
Oh, it's that day once again, Bucketheads, Star Wars Clone Wars Rewatch Mondays. Mayvar Tigar, and welcome to the 80th Strategically Stealthy episode of Mandovision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. Remember, the best way to reach out to us is via social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert, and if possible, so inclined, sweet 5-star reviews. The best and easiest way to help support small independent podcasts like us stand out, not get lost in the shuffle, and to stealthily sneak around that algorithm and let people know that we're doing good stuff over here on the Mandovision podcast. And we thank you so much for taking the time to do that in advance. All right, we have got a great episode. I'm really stoked to talk about this one. This is season 2, episode 16, Cat and Mouse. The original air date was March 26, 2010. And boy, oh boy, is this... You know, we've gone back to Christophsis a couple different times throughout our rewatch on this show. And listen, if you're either into Christophsis or you're not, one of the things about going to Christophsis, though, is that it reminds us that Star Wars The Clone Wars is not always a show being told in chronological order. You know, and I know that's something we've talked about at a couple different points in our rewatch of these episodes. This is another example of that, of an episode that's going back, and at least at this point of the series, is chronologically the first one that takes place in this Clone Wars series. I think it even works before the events of the Clone Wars movie. If I remember correctly, in the movie, Obi Wan and Anakin are pulled off Christophsis to go aid in the rescue of Jabba's child. So, you know, that's something to always pay attention to. And, you know, we're in a stretch right now where I believe this is the 5th episode in a row with no Ahsoka Tano. And when it comes to an episode like this, it's because Ahsoka's not been introduced to these characters yet. So something to keep in mind as we sort of continue to dive into the series. Oh, turn that music down just a touch too fast there. Sorry about that. I meant to fade it a little bit more. What are you going to do? You know, amateur hour over here in the podcast. I'll talk to the engineer. We'll get him out of here in no time. What are you going to do? Let's get into our plot for this week's episode, though. Anakin is tasked to fly a prototype cloaked ship to get supplies to Bail Organa on Christophsis, but he can't resist an urge to attack a blockade headed by the infamous Admiral Trench. This week's episode, directed by Kyle Dunleavy, written by Brian Larson, with Druzy Greenberg once again stepping on board as the story editor for the season. Our voice cast for this week's episode: Matt Lanter is Anakin Skywalker, Tom Kane is the narrator and Admiral Yularen, D. Bradley Baker once again is the Clone Troopers, Commander Cody and Admiral Trench, James Arnold Taylor is Obi-Wan Kenobi, Phil Lamar as Bail Organa and the tactical droid, and Matthew Wood as the battle droids. And that's another thing to point out in this episode, too. Again, going back to the chronology-ish topic. Because, again, this is the first in the series, basically, as far as the timeline goes. We're seeing Anakin and Yularen, who don't really know each other well at this point. Like, they seem to have been thrust together. And they're just beginning to get to know each other, beginning their relationship with one another. And it's again, more interesting stuff as we sort of flesh out the Star Wars, the Clone Wars universe that we're inhabiting, and it's exciting. I know sometimes some people in the audience, they don't care for like the non-linear storytelling when it comes to shows like this, because the Clone Wars has jumped around the timeline, and you're never quite sure where things are falling. But again, since we're at Christophsis, that is an indicator that we are at the beginning. the beginning of the Clone Wars universe. If you want to shrink it down, you know, uh, that's an interesting way to explain it, to shrink it down. But like, if you were to focus just on the animated adventures in the Clone Wars era, this is technically first. So our Jedi fortune cookie for this episode: a wise leader knows when to follow. And again, another one that's not too deep thinking. There's not a lot of double meaning in that one. But yeah, Yularen, Anakin, again, kind of figuring out their dynamic, when to push, when to pull. And Anakin more at odds with Obi Wan in this episode, as they sort of were towards the end of Attack of the Clones and these early chronological episodes where they were a little bit more they were sort of sorting out their feelings on things. I think Obi-Wan had some hurt feelings after Attack of the Clones and everything that happened on Geonosis, and Anakin was sort of stretching his legs maybe a little too far, kind of putting himself a little too far out there for someone who was yes, a Jedi Knight by the end of Attack of the Clones, but still very much an apprentice to Obi-Wan, and so they again, that interesting dynamic between the two is so much fun and so full of possibilities to explore. And again, they're much more even now in the Clone Wars era. You know, Anakin has been promoted, and I think Obi-Wan kind of chafes against that. And again, I think there are some hurt feelings for what occurred during the events of Episode 2. So we'll have to see about that. And again, Obi-Wan always suspicious. I think he's always been suspicious of Anakin and his relationship with Padme, but he sort of refuses, because of his connection to Anakin, sort of refuses to go too deep on that. But it is kind of interesting to see Obi-Wan chafing against this more independent Anakin now that he is a full-fledged knight and he's on his own. So something to pay attention to when we're in these earlier timeline. I'm tripping over my words a little bit here, but you know what I mean. This is earlier in that part of their relationship where Obi's struggling to deal with Anakin on his own, and he doesn't necessarily follow his orders all the time. It was a lot easier to yell at Anakin when he was just a Padawan, not so much anymore. That's all I've been trying to say about that. All right, so let's get into the episode proper. You know what that means? It's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Fire all forward cannons. Cut off those Republic supply ships. Separate them from their escort cruisers. I smell fear. And it smells good.
So this episode starts, and we're in the thick of it. We're above we're in the space above Christophsis. Battle is raging between the Separatist blockade and the Republic cruisers that are attempting to break that blockade to bring supplies and relief efforts to the people of Christophsis and to Bail Organa, who's trapped on the surface of the planet. It's Admiral Yularen, it's Anakin. They're waiting for reinforcements from General Kenobi. And we also get our first taste of Admiral Trench, who we played that sound clip from before. We will find out shortly after the introduction of the stealth ship that this plot is centered around. Yularen has had history going up against Admiral Trench, so he knows the tactics. He knows that Trench is a formidable foe, and I think that sort of history between these two is really interesting because remember, prior to the events of the Clone Wars, it's star systems have a military presence, but there's no Grand Army of the Republic at that point. So any space battles going on are between species and systems, star systems, and things of that nature. It's not conflicts that the Republic is too want to get involved in. Remember, they're more about policing and things of that nature. It's almost like a galactic United Nations in that sense. Though I guess the United Nations does have a peacekeeping aspect, and I think the Republic does as well, but not an active military in that sense. So it's interesting to see that there is a history between them. Admiral Trench, I think, is a really interesting villain. We don't know a ton about him. He is a Harak is the name of his species. He very much looks like a giant walking, talking tarantula, which is scary to me because I do not care for the spiders. Also, like Indiana Jones, I do not care for the snakes. But yeah, spiders are just as creepy. Give me the heebie-jeebies as well. His homeworld is Secundus Anno, and yeah, again, a very interesting species. He's a very crafty character. At the getting ahead to the finale episode, it would appear that Anakin has not only defeated Admiral Trench but killed Admiral Trench as well with his own weapons. We find Admiral Trench does return later on in the series, but a very different version of himself. He has a lot of, on his left side of his body, he's very cybernetic at that point. The damage that was dealt to him was pretty intense. So when he does return later on in the series, He has a much different appearance than what we've seen before, though. In what I can only describe as sort of weird Star Warsy cyberneticisms, like everything on him is cybernetic to mirror his other half. So the whole, like, the mandible that he has on his right side is replicated as a cybernetic piece on his left side. It's very, very interesting stuff. And he's a character. I think he even he appears in the episode of the Clone Wars in the final season that introduces us to the Bad Batch. I think it's just as a hologram, but again, you see Trench in that as well. So he does pop up here and there, and I think he is even referenced in the Admiral Tarkin, or I'm sorry, the book is just Tarkin, but the book about Will of Tarkin's sort of rise, if you will. So a character who I think is interesting, and again, I liked that we had a history going up against Admiral Yularen from the Republic. So he analyzes, Yularen analyzes these tactics, and it's like, no, it can't be. This is the work of Trench. And Trench is also very interesting in the sense that, he's commanding this droid army and the Separatist forces, but he's sort of like detailed his ship. It has like a paint job on there. It's got like some eyes, and it looks like it has like a mouth. Like, it's very very unique amongst the Separatists as far as like the level of personalization that's gone into his ship. So Obi-Wan's forces arrive, and the Republic pulls back a little bit while they reassess how they're going to attack this blockade, because Obi-Wan has a little surprise that he wants to present to Anakin. And so he has shown the starship, the stealth starship, and not just like stealth. I mean, like it fully cloaks. Like, you don't see it. Like, Anakin almost walks right into it when it's first introduced. So let me go ahead and play the little clip here where Obi-Wan and Anakin talk about the starship, about this prototype starship, and its capabilities. Let's check it out.
That's some trick.
Let's hope the Separatists think so.
So I assume scanners can't detect it.
As far as we know, but this is the first real field test.
That's encouraging.
I figured you'd be up to the challenge.
So, I can move in undetected and take them out from behind. That's a pretty small ship to destroy a whole fleet. Are there more?
No, this is the prototype, and you won't be on the offensive. I need you to run a mercy mission down to the planet's surface. The ship can carry enough supplies for Senator Organa's headquarters.
Oh, I'm still the delivery boy? We don't need the whole fleet. I can do this myself.
Anakin, slow down and do what I tell you. It's more important to save lives than destroy ships. I need you to continue the mercy mission.
All right, so there we go. That's sort of like what I was talking about before, where Kenobi's sort of used to telling Anakin what to do. And again, they're very much on an even playing field at this point in their relationship. So Anakin obviously chafes against that, but it's interesting. Of course, obviously, I think Obi-Wan is right. The relief effort has to come first, but Anakin's always on the attack. Another aspect of this episode that's interesting to follow up on is, because it is chronologically earlier in the series, Anakin doesn't quite have his reputation yet. He's not known for the aggressive battle tactics, so no one really knows what to expect when they encounter him. And it's again, it's a neat little thing here to kind of go back in time and see a earlier era of, not era, but an earlier period in the war where, the clone troopers who battled with him directly know what Anakin's capable of, but it's not a reputation that's gone through the Republic. Anakin is not quite the hero of the Republic at this point. And I think that's again an interesting thing to kind of go back into and see this earlier period of Anakin's time, as he's getting his feet under him as a general in the Grand Army. And so the next thing I want to play is a clip. This is going to be from when Yularen is researching and comes across, all the, he's inputting the data, and he's coming in like, oh, this symbol and all this stuff that clearly points to this being Admiral Trench. He's not dead like you thought he was, way back when, in the last time you encountered him. So he's going to relay that information to Anakin, and I wanted to play that sequence for you guys, so check that out.
What have you got?
Something about this morning's engagement struck me as familiar. So I did a bit of research.
And?
I believe the opposing commander is none other than Admiral Trench.
If I remember my military history, wasn't he vaporized at the Battle of Malastare and Arrows?
That's what I thought too. But the tactics employed, the efficiency of the droid's maneuvers, and then there's this. The last time I saw that symbol, let's just say I lost a lot of good men that day.
What do I need to know?
I have seen his work firsthand. A corporate fleet was blockading Malastare.
Let me pause right there for a second. He says a corporate fleet. Now, this might be a callback to some old school Star Wars stuff right there. Back when the first movie hit big, there's a lot of spin-off. There were a few novelizations that came out around the time. Like we all know about Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster, but there was a whole Han Solo trilogy by Brian Daley. And one of those books was Han Solo in the corporate sector. So that might be a callback to the old Brian Daley Han Solo novels that predate the events of A New Hope. And so I was just kind of curious. Do you all think so? You all feel the same way? That's kind of where my head's at. Let me get back to Yularen's story right now.
A fleet led by Trench. That's why I recognize the tactics. He tore our ships apart. We barely escaped with our lives. In the end, a Jedi-led task force moved in to settle the matter. Trench's ship was destroyed, and we assumed he went down with it.
Are you sure it's him?
It's possible. Not every captain goes down with his ship.
Well, we may be in luck then, Admiral. My orders are not to engage Trench, just to deliver supplies to Senator Organa.
With all due respect, General, I do not believe we will have a choice in the matter. If it is indeed Trench, he will come for us.
Us?
Yes. I am volunteering my services as consultant, General.
Welcome aboard.
Next in the episode, we're introduced to a new clone pilot who's coming on board to help with this new stealth ship. And this is what, in my opinion, becomes like the highlight of this episode. And maybe because it speaks to something I have a great affinity for, which is the classic World War II submarine movies like Run Silent, Run Deep. And that's kind of sort of what this section of the episode becomes. This stealth ship is sort of run like a submarine. Like when you go stealth, like you become as quiet as possible. And they do a lot in this episode to kind of play into that, with the way the sonar, the radar, the sort of space radar that they use in Star Wars becomes like sonar on the submarines, the way it's pinging the torpedoes and tracking everything. You can hear all those elements that you would hear in any submarine movie, like even like the modern classics like Hunt for Red October, The Widowmaker, U-571. You can watch any submarine movie and kind of see what they're going for with this episode. And again, the one that reminded me most strongly of was the old classic Run Silent, Run Deep from I think Clark Gable's in that one, I do believe. And again, a little bit of Das Boot to the other great classic World War II submarine flick. And that does such a wonderful job of like ratcheting up this tension. Again, in an animated series, in a Star Wars animated series, where Anakin's not dying, so like it's sort of predetermined that somehow, some way, our heroes will get out of this. But it's one of the finer touches of the episode to make us feel that tension, like the sort of high stakes that are on the line here if they do not complete their mission, and how important it is to be stealthy. And we also have to kind of consider stealth and cloaking devices in Star Wars. They were mentioned in Empire Strikes Back, when the Millennium Falcon turns and makes an attack run on the Star Destroyer as they're coming out of the asteroid field around Hoth. And they disappear off the radars. And that's of course, when Han latches the Falcon onto the back of the Star Destroyer's conning tower. And he says, impossible. No ship that small has a cloaking device. And you have to ask yourself, like, why are cloaking devices not as prominent in Star Wars as they are in Star Trek? Is it because it's more of a known commodity in Star Trek? They sort of like wink at the existence of them, but they never really kind of go deep on why they're not as featured as they were in Star Trek. And they get a little bit into it with the original Timothy Zahn novels. The original Thrawn trilogy talks about cloaking devices to an extent, but they employ them in a different sense than what we have here, where the ship is invisible to the eyes and to the electronics that would normally detect them. And so that was something I was sort of pondered watching this episode. I was like, why hasn't Star Wars ever really gone deep on cloaking and stealth technology and things like that? And my assumption is that it's just too Star Trek, and they don't want to ever kind of seem like the other one. Just like Star Trek's always maintained itself being Star Trek, for the most part. we're not counting Discovery at this point. We're just kind of staying in classic Trek for that comparison. But yeah, they were like, oh, well, that's kind of Star Trek's thing, cloak ships. We don't want to drink from their punch bowl necessarily. But something to consider, something to wonder. And if any listeners out there, if you guys have a better explanation or a better theory even of why cloaking technology is not as prevalent in Star Wars as it is in Star Trek, please, by all means, share with me. I'd love to know more. Maybe it's something I've forgotten or just outright don't know. And please, by all means, share it and help enrich my life so I know these things. I would be delighted to hear it. Because, again, like I was saying about that tension, like a submarine movie, Trench deploys these hyena bombers, and they're going to go on a bombing run on Organa and the people on the surface who are sort of stranded and running low on supplies. So these hyena bombers are being deployed from Trench's ship as Anakin's sneaking around them. But because they can't tell if the cloaking device is actually working or not, there's a moment where everyone thinks they're about to be under attack from these hyena bombers. And again, a great moment of tension on the episode where we have to decide, where Anakin has to make the decision. Are they coming for him or are they doing something else? So he shuts down power. They stay cloaked and the ships do fly by. But it's at this point that Anakin and everyone else realizes they're going to the surface. They're doing a bombing run on the people on Bail, and this is when Bail Organa has to make another plea for help. This time he's addressing General Kenobi directly, and the reason why I want to play this clip is because it's very obvious. The heavily it's a heavy reference to Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, but this time from the mouth of Bail Organa and not his adopted daughter Leia Organa. So check this out.
We are under attack by the Separatist fleet. They're coming by air and by ground. We can't hold out any longer. There's little chance for survival. Help us, General Kenobi. You're our only hope.
Get me Anakin.
Get me Anakin. I love it. Now Kenobi orders Anakin to continue to deliver the relief efforts. Do not stop. Do not try to attack Trench. Anakin's going to disobey that order, as is his prerogative, because he's Anakin Skywalker. He wants to take the attention off the bombing runs on the planet and focus on them. So he sort of alerts them to their presence. He draws attention away from his bombing runs to focus on the stealth ship that's now attacking against them. It's a bold plan by Anakin, and it sort of requires Anakin to show off a bit, and we get to see Anakin piloting that ship like a champ as Trench tries to blow him out of space. But Anakin pilots like a beast, and this is when Trench realizes that a Jedi is at the helm of the ship. So at this point now, Trench is going to make a communique, and I want to play this portion of the conversation as this scene cuts to, as this communication's coming in, and the clones detect it, and they're going to go tell General Skywalker about it. Admiral Yularen is very frustrated that they've given up their advantage of stealth technology. That now that Trench knows he's out there, he will come and hunt them down. And again, we're going to get some vital information out of this conversation, but Yularen is not going to underestimate Trench, and it sort of feels like Anakin, again, as Anakin is wont to be, is a touch overconfident in his own abilities and his own tactics. But much like how the Clone Wars goes, and Anakin more right than he is wrong. But let's play this communication from Trench for Anakin. Here we go.
Now that they know we are here, what's your plan?
I'll think of something, Admiral. In the meantime, I've got Trench right where I want him. Thinking about us.
General, there's a transmission on the open frequency. It's the enemy.
Put it through. Hello, ugly.
I am Admiral Trench. If you are listening, Jedi, you've made a bold move and a grave mistake. I appreciate your decision to face me ship to ship, to play this little game. It's been so long since I had a worthy opponent. You have an impressive new vessel. But I warn you, I have dealt with its kind before. Your technology will not save you, and your friends on the planet below shall perish as a result of your failure. The people of Christophsis and her resources shall join the Separatist Alliance. Turn back now. Retreat while you can, for I am your doom.
All right, so that's good stuff there. A lot going on there. You heard the different changes in the way pitches, not in the pitch of his voice, and that's because Anakin's not the only one watching that communication. We were watching the clone troopers react to the message from Trench, sort of instilling that fear again as this vessel that can cloak itself is now going to be hunted. But Trench has revealed something, and so he's going to Anakin's going to make a request out of Obi-Wan to figure out how Trench has been able to defeat stealth ships in the past. So something very, very, very interesting to consider for Anakin and his tactics moving forward. So Trench is analyzing Anakin's tactics. He realizes that Anakin is rather aggressive. But now Kenobi's going to deliver some vital information to Yularen and Anakin. And let's go ahead and play that out as they sort of have deduced through examples, like the battle histories, what Trench might be up to here. Check it out.
You are right, Admiral. There are records of Trench's battles and a few against ships with cloaking devices.
And?
It seems in each case he used tracking torpedoes to hit the ship somehow, whether it was cloaked or not.
Then he knows a way of detecting us.
Tracking torpedoes? What class ship was he fighting?
Mostly cruiser to cruiser, nothing as small as your ship.
Well, no ship this small usually has a cloaking device. Maybe he's tracking the magnetic signature. Thanks, Obi-Wan. Hold off your attack until we destroy Trench.
Might I remind you that this was not your mission?
You might. Admiral, prepare.
All right, there we go. So Anakin's about to go on the offensive once again. He's going to use the ship to lure Trench into lowering his shields. He's going to use those tracking torpedoes against Admiral Trench. And as you might expect, Anakin, again, those aggressive tactics come in rather handy as he has formulated a plan very, very quickly. A very much a strength of Anakin's here is he might come across as a tad arrogant and overconfident, but his tactics are sound and again, asserting himself as a true hero of the Republic with some of these audacious maneuvers that send a conservative general like Kenobi in all sorts of fits. And again, it's sort of fun to watch that dynamic of the sort of bewildered Kenobi watching Anakin revel in his own success in a sense. Anakin's very much in his environment in the Clone Wars. Let's put it that way. But let's go ahead and check out this. I got one more sequence for you, and then we'll get out of here.
He is headed right for us.
Can't! Raise the shields!
We cannot. The shields are still recharging.
And that is the moment when Admiral Trench realizes he has been outmaneuvered by Anakin Skywalker. And again, the music is fantastic, really ratchets, keeps the tension high in an episode where we know the outcome. We know Anakin's not dying, but Anakin's cunning, being a cunning pilot, his aggressiveness in the battle, his taking Trench's tactics and using them against him, lends itself to a fantastic episode as he is now going to blow up Admiral Trench with his own missiles here. And it's a very Star Trek moment, actually. And again, we referenced Star Trek already with the cloaking devices. The music score reminds me a lot of Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. And there's a lot of elements to kind of be like that. But it's sort of like an inverse, to me at least. It was sort of this episode was sort of an inverse of Star Trek VI, the Undiscovered Country, where the Klingons have the cloaked ship, and they believe they have supremacy because they can move around and fire while cloaked. But it's the Enterprise that tracks the emissions from it, the fuel pipe, right? Or I forget what Uhura says exactly. The thing's got to have a tailpipe, I think is her line. So they modify a torpedo to track that. This is sort of like the inverse of that. And then as Trench's own torpedoes are coming back at him, following Anakin as he runs the ship right across the bridge of the Separatist battlecruiser, there's almost like that look that Admiral Krang gives. Chang. Sorry, excuse me. It's Admiral Chang of the Klingon Imperial Militia, played by the late great Christopher Plummer. Trench sort of reminds me of him in the way that he knows his fate is sort of sealed at that point. At least that's what we think, until we see Trench pop up later, and I think it's like season 6 that Trench sort of returns with that cybernetic features on himself. So really strong stuff, really great episode, action packed. I love the submarine stuff, but let's go ahead and close it out one more conversation between Anakin and Yularen after a successful mission.
Well, looks like we make a pretty good team.
I must admit, I am a bit surprised at the reckless nature of your tactics, though I cannot argue with their results.
Well, you'll find I like to do things, differently from time to time.
Indeed. The Chancellor mentioned as much, though he insisted it was the highest compliment.
And that's it. That's the end of the episode. And I dug the crap out of this episode. I really, really enjoyed it. And again, I'm not going to lie. I have that soft spot for the World War II submarine movies and even the modern day submarines. I'll watch Hunt for Red October any day of the week. You put it on TV and I will watch it. So I love that element. I love that sort of World War II tension. And again, that's very much in the vein of what Lucas was always going for. World War II, heavy influence, obviously, on Star Wars. And, we haven't talked about that probably in a lot of great detail. We've kind of kept it to more of the cinematic influences. But yeah, World War II, big influence. The Empire. In case you didn't notice, space fascists. I mean, it's pretty, it's a pretty even exchange ratio as far as that goes. So a nice callback to some other influences on the Star Wars universe that we know and love so much. So yeah, a rock solid episode. And even just talking about it, I got more excited the more I broke it down. I think initially I gave it an 8. I think I give it like an 8.5. I really dig this one. It's a lot of fun. The space battles are top notch. Trench is a great villain. I'm glad they did bring him back. And Anakin asserts himself with I think a wonderful confidence and resolve, and outshines Obi-Wan in this episode by far. As Obi-Wan would have played it safe and just delivered the supplies. Anakin not only delivers the supplies, he delivers a victory against the Separatist forces, and that's always exciting. And then also you have the forging of his relationship with Admiral Yularen. Again, they have an up and down relationship, as Yularen is the military tactician guy, and Anakin's like the wild card, the X factor. But I really, really dug it. It's a blast, and yeah, you can't. This is a great episode. I really, really dig it, and it definitely, as much as I enjoyed Senate Murders, this definitely turns this ratchets things up again as we begin to make our way to the final episodes of season 2, and I dig it. Yeah, I dig it. And again, remember the chronology. Technically, this is first. This is the first thing after the Battle of Geonosis. This is chronologically. This is one of the first battles after Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So exciting stuff. Though I guess there's probably a little bit more time in there because Anakin did have to grow his hair out a bit from Episode 2. And we can all check the wedding photos to verify that. I'm assuming Padme has a wedding album somewhere stashed. C-3PO is probably guarding it with his life, maybe. Oh, well, I don't know. Maybe not. Anyways, that is it for the episode. I dug this one. How'd you all feel about it? This is Cat and Mouse, Season 2, Episode 16 for March 26, 2010. And I really dig this one. I think it might be a bit of an underrated gem in the season. So a lot of fun. And I'm so happy we got to talk about it. All right, let's get out of here, though. But remember, the best way to reach out to us, let me know your thoughts on the episode of the podcast and the episode of the series. Reach out at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. And please be sure to like, subscribe, and share the show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. If possible or so inclined, 5-star reviews are the best and easiest way to help support the show. They help us defeat the algorithm, and they help us make sure that Admiral Trench will not come back to haunt our dreams as a scary spider alien man. We don't want him in our dreams. No, thank you. All right, let's. What else I gotta say? This is the Mandovision podcast. My name is Tom Nargai Tom. We will be back very, very soon. I think as you hear this, we might be very, very close to the end of Star Wars: The Bad Batch for season 1, and I suspect we will have a lot to talk about with that. So stay tuned. Remember, it's Star Wars: The Clone Wars Rewatch Mondays and Bad Batch Fridays here on the Mandovision podcast. And once the Bad Batch ends and season 2 of the Clone Wars ends, we're going to do a couple special things here and there. We're going to kind of break up the rewatch stuff and give you guys some special episodes highlighting certain characters and certain aspects of Star Wars that we haven't gotten to talk about because we've been so entrenched in the Star Wars lore. See what I did there? Entrenched. Admiral Trench. The stuff writes itself. It's so good. All right, let's get out of here. Keep your buckets on. It's just safer that way. They're bringing the masks back. You might as well just keep the bucket on. It filters out everything. If you have the right bucket, it filters out everything. So practical and easy to use. Plus, you have a sweet T-shaped visor. You can't top it. All right. Everyone stay safe, be awesome to each other, be rad. We will be back, and remember, well, you don't have to remember, because I'm about to tell you, the podcast only ends one way, and this is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.